But for now, I want us to come back to in studio and talk about different matters that regard education. We are talking about transforming education because this goes beyond just the number of children who are in school to encompass how education can be improved, learning skills can be enhanced, as well as enabling tech-enabled education in this aspect. And when you look at UNICEF, it estimates that the Eastern and Southern Africa had about 366.5 million children and young people aged between 0 and 24 in the year of 2025, which is projected to grow by 2030 to around 400 million. So the systems within East Africa ready or gearing up towards these reforms and to accommodate the growing number. For that conversation, I am having Dr. Irene Nyamo, who is the CEO, Regional Education Learning Initiative. Welcome to Good Morning Kenya.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing very well, and
yes.
Thank you for having me here.
Yes, karibu sana. When we talk about reforming education in East Africa, what really are we focusing on?
Okay, thank you. I think there are several things when you think about reforms in education. The most important one is to consider the policies that underpin our education. So think about the curriculum, and that's a very important part of defining the goals and aspirations of the kind of and quality of education we want to see in our nation and in our region. The second aspect would need to look at the changing labor market. When you think about what is happening within the global space and also within our own region, what kind of skills and competencies do we need children and young graduates getting into the labor force, you know, to have acquired? And right now, we consider an important aspect of life skills and values because we want to see people who are not just cogs of in a labor market, but people who can solve problems as the the society and the needs keep transforming. The third aspect that I see is the financing and investment that we would need to put into our education system. And here I'm not just talking about the infrastructure.
Yes.
I'm also talking about the investment we make in terms of thinking about teacher preparation. What is the level of workforce we need given the aspirations and the changing goals of our education system? What kind of attitudes do these teachers need to have? And of course, we also then go into the infrastructure. And as the labor market changes, one would need to think about technology as an enabler for education. So those are some of the areas where I see a lot of transformation needing to happen. And then, policy shifts so that there is recognition of the government as the duty bearer, primarily, and therefore the biggest investment and policy direction should come from government. But then we have other actors defining the roles that they can play. Parents are very important, and I think we don't often recognize the level of commitment and inputs and support parents need. So those are some of the things that I see as needing to affect the transformation process.
Do you know UNICEF estimates that the numbers I give, the Eastern and Southern Africa had about 366.5 million children and young people between the age of 0 to 24. And this is expected to grow by 2030 to around 400 million. From where you stand, is East Africa's education system, are they reforming the existing institutions and preparing for this rapidly growing number?
Thank you. I think, Mike, there is a growing recognition that, of course, we know that Africa has a youth bulge, and this is not a new phenomenon. We started to see it, from the late 1990s, by 2000, you could already see that there is a very huge population shift. And this youth bulge now demands that governments are actually more prepared, because we know that over 70% of the African population is actually made up of people who are below 30. So the future is African in terms of who is being productive in the economic system. And because of that, we've had to think about how are we preparing for it. And you start to see a shift. So, for example, there is now a much more commitment, much bigger commitment to invest in early childhood education, because there is a lot of evidence that is now pointing to the importance of foundational literacy and numeracy. And when these people don't get the necessary foundation, and we're talking about children between 0 to 5 years, you know, the preschoolers and the early years of schooling. When the foundation is not right, then the rest of it doesn't work, because that's where you're getting this evidence that says, you know, only 4 out of 10 children, you know, can read a paragraph.
Actually, the World Bank estimates that 70% of children in low and middle income countries cannot read and understand a paragraph by age 10.
Exactly. So you're talking of only 3 to 4 out of every 10 students being competent enough to read and comprehend. And you know, at age 10, you've already lost the most important foundational process. And that's why there is now a turn and a shift. And I think that we need to recognize. The competency-based education also, which, by the way, almost all the East African community, you know, state parties have actually embraced, is part of that transformation that we are seeing, because there is a realization that there are certain skills, values, you know, things like problem solving, critical thinking, self-awareness, communication. Those are things that children need to have acquired before they advance to the next level, you know, after the foundational level. You know, foundational, we talk about preschool up to grade 3. And that's where we need to see the greatest shift and investments going into.
And speaking of education system, you know, Kenya's CBC and even Uganda's curriculum reforms and similar initiatives across the region, as you've put it, they develop competencies rather than prepare children for examinations. But should we have, what would you say is the evidence that this philosophy is actually changing what happens inside classrooms?
Okay. I think I cannot talk about the evidence without talking about the transformation in terms of how we now assess children. So, for example, you will notice that the progressive work that students do within the term is also an important part of the cumulative assessment and, you know, final grades that you know, each of these students will receive. So change the assessment. But more importantly, you also have to think about preparing the teachers differently. And at the point that the competency-based education program, you know, and curriculum was being developed, the Kenya Institute of, you know, Curriculum Development, and also most of the other agencies dealing with the education matters had to start also thinking about retooling, you know, re-engineering the imagination and the thinking of teachers around how they deliver that curriculum. So if you go to most of the classrooms now, you will notice straight away from very simple things like how the students sit together, because the expectation is that they will work collaboratively. It's not the age of, you know, each child, you know, scoring the highest. It is, what have you acquired in terms of working together, in terms of thinking about how we communicate with one another, how we build consensus, how we respect, each other, and provide a learning opportunity that also takes care of how we understand our own society, protect our environment, and things like that. So there's a lot of preparation that has gone into that. And I think with time we will start seeing a lot more evidence. I would say that we're still in the early stages.
Yes.
But what we need to see, especially in Kenya, is more investment also going into the schools. If we are talking of the 3 different pathways that students can pursue, whether one is going into STEM or social sciences or sports and art, what facilities, what level of preparations are there? And I do know that quite a number of schools have actually reduced their enrollments because students are moving to where they are able to find some of these facilities. So there has to be a shift in that particular investment.
Yes.
But I can tell you that we are beginning to see children who are more expressive, they have more agency in defining and questioning and seeking clarifications on things that they are learning.
Yes. But, something just clicked in my mind. And we can't talk about the transformation of education without bringing in the role of parent in all this. Where do they fit in if this transformation we are talking about is to happen and happening in a way that leaves a lasting impact on the life of the children?
That's a very interesting question because within CBE or CBC, there is a very clear understanding that parents must also be involved. And I think you will recall that at the beginning when the competency-based education was introduced, there was a big call by school teachers that parents have to help in, supervising assignments. And many parents were complaining, why am I paying? Why are the teachers not doing their work? They are paid to do that. But the teacher can only do so much within the classroom. There's a lot more that happens in the informal space, in the home space. And when a parent, from a very early age, say age 3, you're able to read stories, for your children. You're able to expose them to opportunities where you ask them to, undertake certain chores in the house. And you engage them and tell them, explain things to them. And then when it comes to values, if a parent can model respect, love, integrity, things like citizenship, those are things that are caught. There are many values that you cannot teach a child. You can't sit a child and tell them, I want to teach you about, loyalty or integrity. They have to gain those from seeing the parents model those. And those happen very much within the community, whether it is the religious spaces the children have responsibilities towards or within the household. And then, of course, you will also see that within CBE, there is things like cultural dances, community service. When schools identify spaces in the community where parents, can engage with children, then children can learn about community service, taking care of the environment, and different professions, out there, so that people are not just thinking about being prepared for white-collar jobs, but to realize that the community is built through different skills, different capabilities, and different opportunities that we are all contributing towards a better society. And I think that requires the parents to be very engaged. Yes.
Doctor, we cannot ignore tech because we have tech-driven education across East Africa. In countries like ours, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda, they're embracing these digital solutions. Now, when you look at education, and now we are living in the world of tech, how irrelevant is it in the region if we are going to achieve this total transformation?
As I pointed out earlier, I think EdTech is a very big part of that transformation process that we expect to see. And that being the case, we are living in the information, communication and technology age.
Yes.
And so The different ministries, especially within East Africa, if you look at the curriculum and if you look at the preparations that is happening for teachers, you will see that there is a lot of embedding of technology, EdTech, within the education sector. And I think Kenya and Rwanda are really leading in this area. And one thing that really helped to accelerate EdTech integration into education was the COVID era.
Yes.
Because you remember children were out of school for a very long time. And out of that process, we learned that it is possible to use technology in order to enhance learning. Now, there are different ways you can actually use technology for education. First of all, there are resources, and I know KICD has a cloud space where there is a lot of resources that are available. And these resources can be utilized both within the classroom. When a teacher is preparing their lesson plan, they can actually integrate something like a short clip where they watch about how to do an experiment, for example, or how to run a certain procedure in science, for example, checking the levels of acidity in different kinds of matter. And besides that, there is also a lot of advancement that has happened in terms of investing in what we call a connection to the grid. Because even if they are not able to do direct online integration of materials and lessons into the classroom, you can have some of these resources sitting somewhere offline. But it is important that we have that connection. Either they are using solar or they are using electricity, but the gadgets are uploaded with materials that can be used by teachers and students to learn. And then there is, of course, access to computers and the ability to actually navigate that space. At a very early age, children are now learning how to use the computer, how to develop, simple software and things like that. So it's a very important part of the learning process that has to happen. And it would be a disservice to not give the children that opportunity. But we are aware that, for example, in marginalized areas, this is a bit difficult. But I do know that, the distribution of gadgets in different schools is actually helping to improve that situation. And children are actually having a very good experience around technology. But we need teachers to get to the same level, because I know a lot of children are a lot more ahead of us as adults. And so there are different curricula. For example, I know that UNESCO and also within Kenya, we do have frameworks for enhancing digital capabilities for teachers. And this is really supporting teachers to upskill their skills in embedding technology in their delivery of classroom work.
Yes. And the world of AI, artificial intelligence, it's rapidly changing the skills that the students or even the job market needs. So when you look at the Eastern African region, what do you think should the education system be teaching students how to use AI, or fundamentally changing what and how they learn AI?
I think it would be mostly the latter, but at the same time, you cannot ignore the need for people to have the skills to utilize it properly. I think most of us are not using AI in the right way, and therefore we are not harnessing the great capability that AI can unleash in terms of the learning opportunities, because it has become sort of like the default thing. A lot of students are handing in assignments. I was teaching, about 2 years ago, I was teaching in a university. And one of the things I started to notice was the similarity in the assignments that students are turning in. And that's very disappointing as a teacher, because you want your students to engage with the material. And so coming up with clear policies about the most effective way of using AI will help us support our students and learners to utilize it in the right way, because there has to be a human intervention. Even if AI can produce certain things, some of them are actually not accurate. And so you need that understanding, capability, and skill to know at what point does the human intervention begin? Where can I use AI to enhance, say, for example, the way I put across my argument, improving my ability to communicate, my original ideas. But the human mind has to be much more engaged. And then we now teach them, to make use of it in a better way, but also how to actually produce software that can improve people's lives. Because in certain professions, it's actually making a huge difference. Like, for example, in science and surgery, it can enhance, skills. So I think it is a case of safe use and utilization, but also building it in a way that we can make the most use of it.
And speaking of transforming education in East Africa, there's a conference that is coming up regarding the same?
Yes, definitely. I can talk about that, Mike. Because Regional Education Learning Initiative Africa is a regional organization, we work across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And we have got into a very strong partnership arrangement with the East African community. And then together with the Ministry of Education here in Kenya, we are organizing what we are calling the second East African Community Regional Education Conference. The first one was held in 2024. And we were focusing on preparing East African learners for the 21st century. So thinking about collective action around life skills and values. This year, we are focusing on moving from commitment to impact and thinking about how to build a resilient and future-ready sustainable education ecosystem within, the East African region. And so from the 25th up to the 28th, we will be gathering here in Nairobi for a very big conference which brings together all the 8 states from East Africa. So we have Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, and Somalia and South Sudan. They will all be gathering here. We have senior officials, ministers of education, senior technical officers coming together. And we want to talk about what progress are we making in terms of developing youth, in terms of preparing them for the workspace, investing in foundational learning, thinking about education technology, and how it can improve opportunities for education. We are also very invested in thinking around how can data and research, evidence that we generate from research, inform policies that are better prepared to, shape the transformation that we are thinking about. And then, where is the space for higher education? What can higher education do in terms of making sure that actually we prepare people who have ability to think and actually come into the workspace without expecting necessarily to be employed, but to be creators of opportunities.
Very important.
Yes, so there are about 9 themes we'll be focusing on, and we're looking forward to a great engagement at the regional level.
Very important, very important. The idea of creating people who can innovate and create opportunities for themselves. Thank you so much, Daktari, for making time to come and talk about matters of transforming education in East Africa.
Thank you.
That is Daktari Irene Nyamo, who is the CEO of Regional Education Learning Initiative initiative speaking to us about transforming education in East Africa. This is where this conversation ends. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Mike Miguel.